recording this session. It's going to be shared fairly widely after this event. So tomorrow, 3rd of February, is Time to Talk Day, the nation's biggest mental health conversation. It's a day that friends, families, communities, workplaces will come together to talk, to listen, to change lives. Tomorrow is the day when we will absolutely encourage you to have a conversation about mental health. We've organised this webinar to coincide with Time to Talk Day, and we're joined by 5 current and former match officials who will share their stories about how they have demonstrated resilience to overcome some pretty tough challenges that they face within their officiating careers. Crucially, as we look forward to Time to Talk Day, they'll discuss the role both talking and indeed listening played. My colleague Phil Knight will introduce them throughout the course of the evening. We're also going to hear from Callum Park, who's Norfolk's mental health champion, who'll let you know a little bit about his role, and how the champions can help support match officials with mental health problems. First up, though, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Hayley Jarvis. Hayley's the head of physical activity at Mind, and her expertise, her support, her guidance has been absolutely crucial as we set about establishing the mental health champion scheme. Hayley is going to introduce to us the topic of resilience. Hayley, over to you.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks to all of you to make the time to talk about mental health this evening, particularly on the eve of Time to Talk Day. So it's really exciting that you've made time to talk and think about mental health, and also to listen. So we know there may be times or situations in our lives that are more difficult than others, and I think it's fair to say the last couple of years has really tested us all and our resilience. So being asked to stay home, furlough, concerns about family and friends, financial worries, all this change and uncertainty that we've had. Layer on top of that your roles as referees, in lockdown, no appointments, and then now on the other hand, I've heard that some referees have been overwhelmed by appointments. You've had highs, lows, deal with abuse, parents, spectators, all sorts of things about going on, making those split decisions. So as refs, I think you know a lot about resilience. So tonight, I'm just really here to share Mind's definition of resilience, and really keen to sort of hear from you tonight in more detail, your experiences. So it's a word that's used frequently, and for us, it's about the capacity to stay well, mentally well, during difficult times, and that's really what we call resilience. So it can be really difficult for many different reasons. So if you're facing lots of disadvantages, if you've got multiple demands coming at you, it can be really challenging. So resilience for us at Mind isn't just about the concept of bouncing back, which is a bit of a previous school of thought. We believe it's about the ability to adapt in the face of challenging circumstances, whilst maintaining that stable mental well-being. So just to sort of recap, we all have mental health. We're on this continuum from mental wellness to mental illness, from thriving to surviving, and we go up and down. So at Mind, we believe resilience really is something that can change over time. And crucially, as individuals, we have power to change it. So we're not just born with it, it's something that can change, and we should feel really empowered that we can grow our resilience. And I think that's really important. So we know that it can be taught and it can be learned, and that the elements that build up resilience can be introduced into everyday life. So you're not just born with it. Some people may appear on the outside to have better coping strategies than others. But it's really important to remember that our buckets or our cups, or whichever analogy or visual that you like to use, are all different sizes. And you might hear phrases from time to time, things like "you carry the load well." It's something that we develop, and we can build our strategies. And hopefully tonight we're going to hear from all the speakers different strategies that they've picked up over their time. Also, our approach to resilience identifies 3 key elements which we believe lie in the heart of resilience. So those are well-being, social connections, and having ways to cope with difficult events. And we think it's really important to develop all 3 of those. So mental well-being is describes our mental state, so how we are feeling and how we cope with day-to-day life. And it does change, as we know, day to day, week to week, month to month, and year to year. And we can build our well-being by doing things that we enjoy. things that help us to reflect and things that help us to refocus. So some of you will know about your 5 a day for your physical health. We talk a lot in mental health about our 5 a day for our mental health. So the 5 ways to well-being. So those are connect, being active, learning, taking notice and giving. So doing things that we enjoy can really help to strengthen our well-being. It's also about ways to cope. So there is real growing evidence that psychological treatments and things like cognitive behavioural therapy can play a key role in preventing and treating mental health problems. So you might have strategies and techniques that you've developed as through your refereeing to really counteract that fight, flight or freeze mode. So it might be counting backwards from 20. It might be trying to sort of rationalise through positive self-talk something that's going wrong. So those strategies and ways to cope are really important. And finally, it's about those social connections. So we know connecting with people isn't always easy. We know it can be hard to talk about how we're feeling. Sometimes we feel isolated, and actually by bringing people together, by peer support, people supporting one another, we can really tackle that. So tonight is really all about the power of talking and listening and how those conversations can impact our mental well-being. So tomorrow, as we've heard already, it's Time to Talk Day, and we hope that you'll join in millions of conversations across the country. So think about your resilience tonight and listen to the speakers. You're going to hear lots of ways that they cope during difficult times, and take care of your well-being. Share in the chat. I think that's really important. And I'll be back later to sum up.
Okay, thank you, Hayley. So as Hayley said there, tomorrow obviously being Time to Talk Day. So we thought it would be useful to get an introduction into resilience. It's Phil Knight here, by the way. Good evening to you all, and thank you again, as Hayley and Richard have said, for joining us tonight. We thought it would be useful to turn the theory of resilience and how we demonstrate resilience, and those times that as referees and match officials we're tested, and how resilience can be challenged, and how we can, through peer support, through those connections that Hayley talked about, how we can actually come back from those challenges. So this evening we're going to listen to 5 of our colleagues. As Hayley said, we've got former and current match officials who are going to talk us through particular experiences that they've had and how the power of talk and the power of listening has actually helped them to move forward. So we're going to start off with Alan, and then Constantine is going to talk us through some issues around his career progress. Josh is going to talk about a particular experience that he had and how he came back from that and how he worked his way through. Ray Lewis is going to talk through his own personal experiences of coping with a challenge and a test of his own resilience. And then we're going to finish off with Mike Mullarkey, who's going to talk us through that journey that at times match officials have to take. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Alan. As Hayley rightly said, some of the stories we're going to be hearing are very personal, and some of them may actually trigger experiences that you've had around injury or disappointments in your career. So please, as Hayley said, take care of yourself. If you do feel that you just want to pop off for 5-10 minutes, by all means do so. But the most important thing, obviously, tonight is to keep yourself safe whilst our colleagues are sharing with us. Okay, so I shall hand you over to the first of our talkers this evening. There's a photograph in there looking, well, I'll tell you what, Alan, you tell us exactly what you were feeling when that photograph was taken. This is Alan Wilkie, and he's going to talk us through some dash streams. Over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Phil. I shan't tell you what I was thinking or feeling at that moment, because we may have a mixed audience. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to take you back 22 years to this month. And this was the pinnacle of my career. It was my last season. At that time, we had a retirement age, and I'd achieved it. So this was the pinnacle of my career, the twilight, shall we say, as I'm coming to the end of the season. Very fortunate to be given the Football League Cup final, and very much looking forward to it, as you can imagine. So, in brief, the game lasted for me 53 minutes 42 seconds, just to be precise, when I suffered a calf injury. The emotion that I went through at that time was, what do I do next? How do I make sure that the game concludes? Because I shan't be there to carry the game to its conclusion. So medical attention came on and assisted very quickly. Jim Ashworth came on. He's the Football League officer in charge of the day, trying to find out what was happening. He then relayed to my colleague, the fourth official, Phil Richards, to warm up. He was now floating on air because of an opportunity had arisen for him. So all the time I'm being investigated, and medical staff were looking at my leg. And basically the prognosis was, you're going off. There's nothing we can do for you. At which point the stretcher came on, took me to the sideline, and I asked them to stop. So my process was, I need to make sure that the game is restarted correctly. I need to tell him how many cautions I've taken, and I make sure that he has the correct information to see the game through to its conclusion. So we stopped at the touchline. He shook my hand, and I'll never forget it. He said, "How are you?" So anyway, just moving on. I said, it's 53 minutes, 42 seconds. Game restarts with a throw-in beside assistant referee 1. Good luck. You've got 1 or 2 problems that you need to look at, which I pointed out the players that he needed to watch. I was then taken along the touchline to the old Wembley had a hospital, a small hospital. So they took me there, and I'll never forget, the doctor looked at it, strapped it up, and said, "You won't be able to go and get your medal because there's 39 steps that you have to walk up." So I said to him, "Just strap it up, doctor, I'm going for my medal." At which point I limped down the stairs, up the tunnel again, and along to the halfway line. At this point, there was only about 3 or 4 minutes left of the game, and the game finished, and it was our turn to go up for the medal. And I'll never forget the round of applause and the appreciation. And on the way up the 39 steps, got the medal, came down, and watched the cup being presented and all the other bits and pieces. Then made our way back to the changing rooms, showered, changed, etc., and bags were taken to the limousines, and we were then ushered up to the long room, which is the posh room at the old Wembley. At which point I came across my wife and various other people who were at the long room, and that's when the emotion hit. We embraced, cried, etc. And the mixed emotions that I had then were, I was beginning to feel sorry for myself. And then someone came across, the Premier League referees officer at the time came across and said, I just thought I'd let you know that 3 or 4 of your very good friends have just rang me up and said that they're available for your game next Saturday. Now, the emotion then lessened, and anger began to come in. And that's when I would suggest to you that the resilience kicked in. I needed to display the fact that I needed to come back and finish my career on the pitch. And that was the thought process that gripped me then for the next 2 months. I didn't work again for 6 weeks, and the Premier League were very kind to send me down to Lilleshall, which was then the St George's of the day, where the FA medical staff looked after me for a week, and found out what the problem was. It's a thing called compartment syndrome, which is basically your calf muscle explodes. So I was there for a week, and the resilient part of that was to get through the pain barrier. I limped in Lilleshall on the Sunday, the first Sunday, and on the Friday when I went home, I was running, in pain but running. So that was the beginning of 6 weeks of hard work to try to get over the pain and to get back to actual some sort of fitness. Not for 1 second the fitness that was there before, but I was very fortunate. The resilience, the willpower, the courage, whatever you wish, the determination to get back and finish the game, finish my season, finish my career on the pitch, actually paid over fourfold, because instead of getting one game to finish my career, I got 4. And that was, for me, that was a remarkable achievement, purely and simply because on that day in February, when that photograph was taken, my career was over. And the 20 odd years that I've been refereeing to get up to there, to get this pinnacle, shall we say, was all evaporating and all dissolving. But I would suggest to you that the determination, the strength of character, the strength of mind was a big point, but you cannot get away from the fact that my family stood behind me all of the way, and listening to them and the support that they gave me was, I couldn't have done it without them. Equally, the medical people, Hayley was mentioning before about listening to what people have to say, listening to them and trusting them that you need to do this exercise, but it hurts. That's the whole point. Keep going. That's basically things like that you do need to listen. You need to be able to share things and to share the pain and share the emotion. That was quite a character forming period for me. Granted, at the end of my refereeing career, but I think it made me a better observer when I finished refereeing, because there was more, people may not have sort of associate me with compassion, but there was more understanding of referees' performances, the problems that they encounter, and my efforts to try to help them to get over it. And as I say, I was very fortunate. I came back and I finished my career with a whistle in my mouth and walking off the pitch. So that's my story.
Alan, thank you very much indeed for sharing that, and obviously for the honesty in terms of how painful that moment was. And it's interesting there that you almost went into automatic pilot. Those first few minutes when you're on the stretcher, and all that you were thinking about was, we've got to get this game restarted, not thinking about yourself, the end of your career. And as you say, it was only then when you were in the long room and exposed to your family that the true emotion of what unfolded came back.
Absolutely.
I think one really, I think, strong message there was about those friends of yours. I noticed you didn't mention any names, by the way, who will have rung up and jokingly said that they were going to take your appointments and sort of jump into any gaps that you'd left with the allocation the following week. And I was just talking to Con and to Mike about this over the last sort of week. We sort of identified it's very easy to think about contacting our colleagues when they've got cup final appointments, or they've had a great decision on television, or things have gone really, really well. But sometimes actually picking up the phone when it's not going so well, when a mate's in a bit of trouble, even if it's to take the mickey, even if it's to have a laugh at their discomfort in a very positive way, can be quite powerful. And I think, Alan, from what you're saying there, that actually helped, the fact that your friends had come round and had actually had that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, as you say, at the end, it's about, personal determination, personal effort, personal commitment. Setting those targets, those goals is important, but actually being able to lean on those people around you, the specialists in terms of medical profession, but of course also friends, family, colleagues and peers who are going to help as well. So Alan, that's great. Thanks so much indeed for sharing that, and for allowing us one more time to look at that photograph of you being stretchered from the
You're welcome.
I still love the idea of you describing yourself as an empathic observer. I don't know if there's any match officials on who would like to argue against that, but certainly that's something I'll take away from this evening. So thanks, Alan. Okay, so we're now going to come to Con. Con, as you know, is a current serving match official of great repute. Currently, obviously, on the Premier League as a assistant referee, and obviously international as well. And Con is going to talk us through another challenging period in his life, but how not just talking but also listening helped him to bounce back from a disappointment. So Con, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much for having me, guys. So I'm here to talk about me being demoted from level 3, and what led up to it and what happened after it, and some background around it, really. As a young man, I was very ambitious, very kind of into my sport. And when I got into refereeing, I really loved it. I really enjoyed the opportunities that it gave me, where I went with it, and the ability to learn as well. I think I spent 2 years as a level 4. I got promoted at the end of my second season and really looked forward to being a level 3. I had 2 very successful seasons at level 3. I went into my 3rd season, starting my teacher training that season. And without really realising, I'd put myself under a phenomenal amount of workload. I don't know if there's any teachers on the call, but that year of teacher training is phenomenal, the amount of work you're expected to produce. And that season didn't go that well for me. I think I was turned up to games fatigued. There was a number of warning signs, and people had said these things to me. You don't look like you're enjoying it, and I quickly just dismissed them and just carried on in the process that I believe was the correct way. And some games didn't go that well. Some observations from assessors, and at the time, on reflection, I was probably quite arrogant and just thought, do you know what, it's not them. It's not me. It's always them. And I thought, no, do you know what, I'm okay. Things have gone really well so far in my referee career. I'm not going to change now. And like I said, I ignored a number of warning signs that my own colleagues, some friends of mine, had spoken to me on the way, and I still chose to go down the same path that I chose. Came to that end, so the old market season finished in February, level 3. I knew I was close. I didn't expect to be demoted, the honest truth is. I thought I'd be fine. And I thought I'd send a proactive email to Neil Barry and just asked a very frank kind of, if I'm going to be demoted, can I just be told now? I'd rather not wait to the end of the season. And he said, Con, thank you for your email. I'll get back to you. He got back to me a couple of days later. And unfortunately, I found out that I was going to be demoted and be reclassified back to level 4. And I think at that point, I remember exactly where I was. It's one of those moments in your life where you remember bad news for some reason, worse than good news. And I remember straight away kind of panicking and thinking there must be a way to appeal this. There must be a way to kind of find a way to kind of circumvent it. And I kind of refused to accept it for like a good hour and a bit. And at that point in time, I had a very good friend of mine, and I'm very lucky to still work with him now. And I rang him up. I didn't ring anybody else up. I rang him up, who I knew he was my best friend, and he was also a referee. And I told him what happened. So what do we do now? How can we find a way to kind of to get around this? And he said the words, which for the first time probably that season, he said to me, you just have to accept it. And at that point, I probably took a big, deep breath and accepted that. Actually, listening to somebody else for the first time, that, yeah, it's going to happen. And he said, oh, we have to make a plan now. What do we do? My family, quite a very sporty family, and I had to kind of tell my mum, which was quite awkward, but she felt quite sorry for me. I had to tell my rest of my family, my partner at the time. But the key thing was having somebody around you for them to listen to you, and then for them to tell you what they think of you, and actually to kind of come up with a plan of actually perceptually, I came across as very arrogant. Actually, I wasn't that interested in football. I was interested in refereeing, but not in football as a whole. And realising actually my whole approach to refereeing had to change, and to realise actually the problem wasn't everybody else, it was me. And to go away and rebrand myself effectively, finish that season as strong as I possibly could at level 3, and then have an aim to spend one season back at level 4. And I also knew that there was probably a lot of people that I had irritated along the way in the way I approached the game, that they would have enjoyed me being demoted as well. And I had to accept that, going back to the clubs, referee, a assistant referee, and them asking what happened, and actually not coming up with any excuses, taking responsibility for what I did and for my actions, and they could see that, and hopefully they could see that I changed. I got an opportunity, a development game around Christmas, which went well, and that kind of snowballed from there onwards, really. And even though it was a really negative experience at the time, it definitely made me so much stronger as a person. and it opened up actually more avenues for people to for me to take more information in, to listen a lot more, and to be a lot more humble in how I came across. Because I think at the time I was like very sporty, quite muscular, and my dominant kind of personality would come across. And actually, as a referee, you didn't really need that. And I really kind of went back, and when I went back to the clubs that I kind of been quite arrogant towards, changed, been a lot more humble, a lot more mellow, and kind of came in there with a different outlet. And that definitely helped me get promotion back. And then from there, I've been very lucky that, and I kept that kind of a core group of friends around me that I relied on. I didn't seek too much from too many people. The core group that we bounced ideas off, would come to watch games and would speak about each other. And I've no doubt that experience then has definitely made me a better match official on the Premier League in dealing with decisions that have gone against me and mistakes that I've made. So even though it was a very negative experience at the time, that's definitely helped me longer term in my career. Yeah, that's it for me really. If there's any questions, you're welcome to ask. Richard, I don't know how you want to structure it, Phil.
Yeah, Con, thank you. If anybody's got any questions, please fire them in the chat group, the chat box.
Okay, Con, thank you again. Again, huge honesty there, and a very brave thing to say. To some of the words you use there to describe young Con or younger Con. Arrogant. Just that feeling of almost entitlement. And the description of how you coped, the original shock of being reclassified, so shock, then we had denial, and then of course through talking, we found ourselves with some acceptance, which actually, for those of us obviously who understand how grief works, that is the grief cycle. That's what we go through. Those are the sort of, and of course you were much younger at the time, Con. Won't you just remind us how old you were at the time of this experience?
I was 21 at the time.
21, and you'd been refereeing for how long?
I qualified when I was 14. I was still playing other sports.
Yeah.
But I think at 20, I decided that I wanted to become a referee in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So when I got demoted, I did kind of think that was me done.
Yeah.
And I the only thing I did think was I'm not giving up. I've never given up my entire life.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to stop. So for me, giving up was never an option.
But what was great though, Con, was that the friend that you talked to, and by sitting and sharing and listening to, not just talking but actually listening as well to the feedback you're getting, and seeing how you could then change, but also how you could plan, and how you could rather than make the same mistake twice, how you could be different. And you said there earlier on, Con, that you became a better match official, and I wonder if you also perhaps think that you perhaps became a better person as well as a consequence of the experience.
I think it definitely gave me more resilience, and it definitely gave me a better outlook of how I was perceived actually just as a person. And when I would walk into a room with new people, what was the first impression of me? That definitely opened my eyes up differently.
Well, thank you, Con. Any more questions for Con? Thank you to some questions there. Okay, thank you, Con, and obviously the best of luck at the weekend. Are you out in the FA Cup? I think you are. Are you?
Nottingham Forest.
Oh, okay. Oh, hang on. We have got a question. Could you read that question out for me, Richard? Because it's disappeared from my screen. Sorry.
You're muted, Richard.
Yep. Richard, you're mute.
You're muted.
And you'd have thought after 2 years of this, I would. So let me start again. So the question is, how have you managed making errors with regards to players' responses? It was interesting to hear you talk about being arrogant. Did you find, I think this is the crux of it, did you find that being more honest about mistakes helps?
Yes, I think I found a way of kind of sympathising with players and actually understanding that not every single one of my decisions is correct. I think ultimately when you make a decision on the field of play, you're always going to disappoint somebody. And to understand actually how to keep a balance, because in refereeing, keeping a balance of the game is the most important thing. It isn't always about being a referee is about a event management. It isn't always about right and wrong. And actually, I was obsessed with being right all the time. and actually taking a step back and realising that you can be wrong and you can apologise on the field of play wasn't a sign of weakness.
And there's one more coming, Con. Let's deal this one. Con, how long did it take you to become a Premier League match official?
So I qualified when I was 14. I was in a really privileged position where I joined Charlton Referees Academy, and that gave me a great platform. I probably didn't take refereeing that seriously really until, so I went to university, probably when I was 20. I probably decided I wanted to become a referee on the Premier League. I wanted to go all the way. I saw the opportunity it could give me. Academically, I always struggled with academically really. My biggest skill set was probably more of an athlete, and I knew I could bring that to refereeing. So I think I've been on the Premier League now 7 seasons. So I got the Premier League, so 10 years in total.
Well, thank you. Phil, nothing else in the chat box right now.
Okay, thank you, Con.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you for sharing that experience. So
Yes,
if
sure.
we just to sort of pause, do you think it's hard to be an LP official critter? There's a Con. We'll move on, and we'll take that question offline if that's okay. In terms of just reflecting for a second in terms of where we've been with Alan and Con. So we've talked about dealing with injury. We've talked about dealing with injury in quite unique circumstances, but actually, you know, the disappointment of injury, which is something that all of us on the call either have experienced or may experience. And then we've talked through the disappointment of, you know, having to cope with a public situation like reclassification. The next colleague we're going to talk to is Josh, and Josh has an experience that unfortunately, you know, we see thankfully rarely, but Josh is going to share his experience of being assaulted on the field of play, and how, again, talking, peers, you know, that sort of network of social support that Hayley referred to earlier, how that came in to help. So I'll hand over to Josh and how he restored his confidence by talking. Josh, over to you.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you for everyone for tuning in and listening tonight. I'm going to take you back to a day. It was 7th of September 2019, and I was 16 at the time. It's my fourth adult game. So I've been reffing youth football since I was 14. I'm obviously moved up into the men's game as soon as I could. Had a couple pre-season games. I think this is the second league game that I did. 7th of September, and it was a challenging game. It was a challenging game, and I think anyone of any age, of any experience, can look back and say that things could have been done better. But on the whole, it wasn't a particularly bad game. Wasn't a particularly good game, but it was certainly heated. And midway through the second half, I had a bit of a confrontation with a player after I gave a corner. He thought it was a goal kick, and he called me the wonderful C word. Which I rightly sent him off for the foul and abusive language. In response to that, he looked me up and down and then spat at my feet, which at the time was not very much you can do about it. Obviously, the sending off had already occurred. We just had to get on with that. The game continued on after that. It sort of calmed down a little bit. I think that sort of helped with things. And I thought that was that. You know, I thought it was a heat of the moment sort of thing. Unfortunately, not from this individual himself, but the team. His team weren't happy after the game. They went back to the changing rooms. I had a quick chat with the opposition manager on the halfway line, just discussing how challenging the game had actually been. This team invited me into their changing room. And I told them that was completely unprofessional and I had no need to do that. And I'm glad I didn't, because I don't know what would have happened behind closed doors. But one of the players approached me once the manager had cleared and asked me for the team sheets with the offender's name on. And I said, "You're not getting the team sheets. It needs to go in my match report." And then after a bit of back and forth, he ran up and punched me, essentially. I fell to the ground. I was dizzy. I temporarily lost my hearing, lost my vision, and he ran away, drove off. I've never seen him again. But That was tough. That was tough. Obviously, again, for any match official, any experience, any age, that would be a tough blow to take. But as a 16-year-old just getting into the game, it was certainly a setback, or it felt like one at least. Thankfully, my dad was there, although he couldn't stop the stop the punch. But it sort of provided a bit of protection, I guess, and thankfully as well, the home team were great, and sort of helped with the situation too. It felt quite lonely though, even with all these people around me. It felt quite lonely. Obviously, I spoke to the police, took a statement, and I was in the ambulance, and it was only then really that it sort of hit me what had actually happened. And yeah, it was a super sort of low place to be. And I think back to the following days. I mean, this was on a Saturday, and I had the Sunday and then school on the Monday, and by then sort of everyone had heard about it through the radio and whatnot. But it was a strange feeling. Obviously, physically I was still feeling it. My head hurt a lot, but it was a mental blow too. It sort of felt like everyone was looking at you. And sort of saw you differently, and it's a weird feeling it brings on. It's a weird feeling. And again, for that Monday to Wednesday at school, it was sort of go to school, get home, and go to bed, to be honest, because I didn't want to do anything else really aside from that. It was a massive blow to my confidence, real massive blow. And I think as well, the fall would have been worse if I hadn't had so many people around me sort of padding that fall. Because when I talk about people around me, my friends at school, obviously great. They were great support. My refereeing colleagues can probably sympathise more than anyone, as you guys can, I'm sure. But they were there for me too, and obviously my RDO with Kent FA, Nick, messaged me and made sure I was all right, and also the league secretaries and stuff, they came around and took their reports. And Ben, who's also one of my good mates now, was also a referee, took the report for the league, and it was good to have everyone there. And I think what was most important was my family, particularly my parents. I knew what I needed to do, which was to get straight back to it again. But doing that was so much harder than just saying it. To pick yourself up again and sort of put the boots on is tough. But like I said, thankfully my parents were there, and they said, look, you know what you need to do, and it's about doing it now. And thankfully I listened to them, took that on board. I got back the following Saturday, I refed again. And I was nervous, super nervous, because you think after this incident anything can happen, and it was a scary first 5-10 minutes. But again, you sort of have that, the natural feel comes back. It comes back, and what you're taught and what you've learned comes back to you. And actually, it was one of the easiest games of my life, because all the players knew about the incident and were not about to give me some stick. So one of the easiest games I've ever refed. But yeah, I think as the overall message was that I cannot understate the importance of having people around you and speaking to people, because like I said, I wanted to keep quiet about it, but if anyone had let me do that, I'd have ended up in such a worse spot. So I'm thankful for everyone around me who did pick me back up. And yeah, I haven't looked back since. It's been 2.5 years. Got promoted in that time, and really enjoy my refereeing. But yeah, I think that's it from me, Phil. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. And again, isn't it interesting? Very similar to what Con was saying there about, you almost don't want to reach out because embarrassment, shame. Not that there's anything to be shamed for, but not wanting to share. And it's a natural inclination not want to, but actually the power that you got from that was quite immense. I think we've got some questions. I actually saw a hand up as well from a colleague. Do you want to unmute yourself, sir? And
I think the hands up, Neil Rank.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Josh is saying. A good friend of mine is involved in the professional game. He's been a he was a Premiership player, played Premiership and Championship, and is now a coach in the. He's coached at various Premiership and Championship clubs. This is one of the problems: is that young guys like you get abused, attacked. Thankfully, I've never come across a situation like yours, Josh. But referees get abused, and they call it a day. You could have quite easily, after that incident, said, "I'm not going to referee anymore," and that then causes a problem because the players are not coming through the system anymore. So you get, those that stick with it are put under so much pressure because they're promoted probably ahead of what they should be doing. And so I do admire you for how you dealt with this situation, and also for sticking with it, because a lot of people would have just given up.
Well, yeah, thank you. If it was up to just me, to be honest, like I said, I knew what I had to do, which was to get back at it. But if I hadn't had the network around me or spoken out to the network around me, it probably would have been a strong possibility that I would have potentially hung up boots for a little while at least.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Where the referees from 2025 going to come from?
Exactly that.
Richard, just while you're looking,
I'm fine on the refereeing second. I've refereed for 20 years now. That the referees are just getting old. There's very few young referees around at the local league levels and county league levels. There are very few young referees around. So where the referees of the championships and the premierships going to come from, I don't know.
Yeah, just one point I would like to make, Josh, and I think it's important to. Josh gave his presentation a couple of months ago to a similar meeting at Kent FA. And one of the, for me, really pleasing aspects was that social media, obviously, at times gets quite a ordeal, and trolling and everything else. One of the things that you really expressed and actually showed us some copies of, Josh, were comments from people you didn't even know. Some people not even in the game who read about it on Kent Online or heard about it on the radio, who reached out and said this isn't right, and wished you the best and gave you that support. So sometimes we don't even have to sort of talk and listen to people we know, that other people will recognise and will step forward. And I thought that that was a really important part of that message, wasn't it, Josh, in terms of the support you got, not just from people but from people within the wider community.
Absolutely. I mean, it was the messages probably would have been in the hundreds, and it was all almost overwhelmingly all positive. I mean, the ones that stand out for me was a message from a referee in Switzerland that had heard about it, and then there was one in America too, and they both got in contact to wish me the best. Yeah, it was nice. It's nice to know that people are behind you with a situation like this, and it's recognised that it isn't acceptable.
Well done, Josh. Any more questions, Richard?
Phil. I think Chris Parkinson has raised his hand. Chris, far away.
Yeah, hi. Just want to say, I'm 16 at the minute, and I had an incident a few months ago where a manager basically ran onto the pitch to start screaming abuse at me because he thought I'd got something wrong. And one of the best things I had was immediately after that, the home manager and some senior members at the club I was doing it for came and took a report and made sure I was okay. And I think the support that I got from that was really helpful, because otherwise I might have just given up. But they made sure that the manager that it was rightly punished and kept me going.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's important to remember in these situations that, well, it's hard to remember actually that most people are good people. Like you have these instances, and then suddenly you've got your outlook on people and life changes a little bit. But again, it's important to remember that the majority of people are there to support you. And as it was in that case, the home team manager and players have supported you there, and that's great to see.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Con made a point earlier on actually about that. One of his concerns when he got his news was that there'd be people within refereeing, because it is competitive. We all want the cup final, we all want the big game, but there might be people there who are actually almost enjoying his discomfort, enjoying his what had happened to him. And so it's pleasing when we actually find out that there might be a very, very small minority like that, but actually most officials would want to support somebody like Josh, somebody like Con. And in fact, Alan, even Alan, at the top of the game at the time that it happened to him. So I think there's a real comfort there that, yes, OK, we are competitive. We are all, perhaps wanting to be the highest person on the merit table. But as referees, and members of the referee workforce, we all have that empathy and sensitivity about understanding how our colleagues are feeling. And that reaching out is an important part of that. Richard, are we ready to go on?
Just very, very quickly, one or two people, Josh, are interested to know whether the offending player was prosecuted. Are you able to share? Do you know what happened there?
Yeah, so the player who assaulted me and also the player who spat at me and used the foul and use of language both received 5-year suspensions from football through the FA. And then in terms of criminal prosecution, the player that assaulted me, I believe, got 25 hours behavioural sessions and a £100 compensation charge, which I'm yet still to receive. So,
OK. Josh, thank you. Phil, back to you.
Thank you, Josh. And again, thinking about those experiences now that we've talked about in terms of assault, thankfully, where even abuse, on the field of play will have impact on us. Injury and reclassification. Our next speaker is slightly different. This speaker went through an experience that is pretty unique in terms of having to cope being a match official in a situation, an event that is so public and is so, for all the wrong reasons, so memorable. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Ray, who will talk you through his own personal experience. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Phil, and thanks very much for the introduction. Yeah, I had the misfortune of refereeing the Hillsborough disaster match in 1969. And just to give you sort of some background of this, that the 4 match officials, Dave Axel, John Brownwood, Neil Jenkinson, were appointed to the game with myself. We stayed overnight in Sheffield the night before the game. The build up to the game was dare I say, like any semi-final, I suppose. And we had pre-security briefings from Chief Superintendent Duckenfield. And the game lasted 6 minutes as tragically more and more people lost their lives. I was asked to remove the players from the field of play, told by the police at that stage for a 20-minute delay and we'll be back on the field. And at 3:45, when fatalities had been identified, I went into both dressing rooms and told them that the game had been abandoned and for them to move off. Our dressing room was used as a first aid room. I got changed after the match, or how long the match lasted, at 6:15. I met up with John Motson, had a cup of tea with him, and left Hillsborough at 6:45. I then moved on to Birmingham or to near Birmingham Airport because there was an exec meeting of the Association of Football League Referees and Linesmen that evening and the following day. So I was fortunate to meet up with a group of people that could understand the pressures that a referee and an assistant referee has. And naturally, it was very useful to sort of talk these things through. I must admit, I was fairly numb at the time to think of what had happened in such a short period of time. The difficulty, I think, was not necessarily with me, but it was a problem of the family at home. My wife started to receive telephone calls just after 4 o'clock. I think it would be very difficult to sort of get back from Hillsborough to London or to Surrey in a position that I would be at home to answer any phone calls from the press. I in fact left the exec meeting at about 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and got home at 8 o'clock, where I must admit I was very pleased to be in the company of the family. There was constant phone calls from the press. We had a chap from the Sun newspaper sleep outside the house for 24 hours. We had the Sky News setting up for a so-called pre-arranged meeting interview at 5:30 one morning. So there was extra pressures that were called upon with regard to this incident. I decided not to talk to anyone, in fact, for probably about 10 days, i.e. media. And in fact spoke first of all, I think, about 10 days afterwards to the BBC television. I'd naturally been in touch with the Football Association. I was regularly in touch with my three colleagues that were involved in the game, and we all decided that it'd be better for us to officiate in the game when it was rearranged. I must admit, the following Saturday, when I was refereeing at Bournemouth, it was a strange sensation, and as Josh just said, you know, it might have been the best thing to do is to try and sort of get on with doing a game and trying to get back into a routine. People naturally knew that of my involvement, and when I think people held back in asking questions about it, and it was a sort of quite a strange feeling, like I was keeping it all inside me, but I had the family, I had the friends of the association, I had the FA who were only too pleased to be involved and to ask questions. I'll give you something that really sort of made me think. This book here is Kenny Dalglish's book called My Liverpool Home, and part of it is part of the chapters, in fact, is from entitled Hillsborough. He says, emotionally drained, I retreated to my office, sat at my desk, and knew there were calls to make, particularly to Ray Lewis. People overlooked that Ray was in the middle of a tragedy, that he'd witnessed events that would psychologically scar any man. Ray was from a village called Great Bookham, which I always found rather appropriate for a referee, so I looked up his number in Surrey. Ray, it's Kenny Dalglish. And at that stage, I must admit, I thought, now come on, who's pulling my leg at this? I'm just calling to see how you are. Our conversation was short because neither of us wanted to relive what we'd seen, but I gained the impression that Ray appreciated Liverpool, was thinking of him and his welfare. We all had each other at Anfield. Ray had nobody. So it was important I made contact, showing some compassion. I thought that was great. That was one afternoon that a busy guy involved with funerals, etc., had the time just to phone to find out how match officials. We sometimes knock the relationships between match officials, managers, and coaches, etc. But I think there really did prove that we are part of the game. I'd attended many of the memorial services. I was there, in fact, when Andy Burnham was shouted down with regard to justice. And I don't know if many of you have seen this recent production of the TV play Anne, but I think it really did sort of home in on exactly the situation that the families were going and were going through at that time. The game at Old Trafford was tense. It was a tense morning. The police came in with the security meeting and said that the kickoff's got to be delayed. I went into both dressing rooms and told them that we won't be kicking off at midday. We'll be kicking off at, I think it was 20 past 12 in the end. And the situation there was quite interesting, where I got acceptance completely from Liverpool's dressing room. But Mr. Clough did make some silly comments about delaying the kickoff at that stage. So much so that the chairman and secretary of Nottingham Forest came in to apologise. The inquiries that sort of happened after that, the second one that came through, I was disappointed when we met the police at prior to the game at Manchester United. We met up at the hotel. Members of the West Midlands Police that were doing the inquiry were there, and we made a statement which I signed, a handwritten one. And it wasn't until 25 years later, when the second inquiry was coming about, that I noticed then that they had changed the words when the statement had been typed up. These are all the type of things which are continuing with something that happened 33 years ago. And it's one of those things that doesn't seem to be able to leave you once you're involved with something like this. A memory I had of going back to Manchester at some other stage to do a 6-round game between Man City and Spurs is that we had a pitch invasion that afternoon. The horses came on, and I was thinking to myself, God, I hope this isn't another Hillsborough. And there was only 11 minutes to play. And I can remember coming in into the dressing room after the game, being followed by the chief of police, match commander. And he complained to me why I gave a penalty within those last 11 minutes, having had a pitch inspection. I drove very carefully out of Manchester that night. So that was a memory that I can from that. Phil, I think that's all I'd like to say.
Ray, thank you very much indeed for that. Obviously, as you say, you know, your memories and clearly, you know, 33 years in a couple of weeks are still very fresh. And as you say again, you know, because of the continued interest, that it's one of those things that probably will stay. And clearly, you know, trying to show that resilience to come back in the way you have, I think is quite remarkable, Ray. So thank you very much indeed for sharing that very personal story with us this evening. I think there were some questions, Richard. Are there some? I've seen people raise hands.
We've got a few hands up. So if we first of all take one from Edward J. Edward? No, Edward, let's come back to you. You might be muted, perhaps. Neil Rank again. Neil. No, okay. Let's move on to Davy Green, I think. Davy.
Can you hear me now?
Who are we talking to now?
This is Neil Rank. Neil Rank.
Far away, Neil.
Okay, Ray, I do sympathise with you because I was actually at that game, albeit as a spectator. And I do remember the constable running on the pitch, and you blew the whistle straight away and the players went off. So I do remember that. Yeah, how did I deal with that? I think it was just by talking to people. So you had a more difficult situation because you had the media chasing you. I just spoke with friends. You had the media to deal with. But yeah, I do. It was a terrible situation. That game has never been replayed on television. I think people forget that. I think it was Peter Beardsley hit the bar after about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's great.
Liverpool hit the bar, didn't they, after 3 or 4 minutes? And that may well have caused the surge. I don't know, but I do remember that. And I do remember the thing that always sticks in my mind on that incident was the helplessness that I had. You just had to sit and watch it, didn't you? I had to sit and watch it. You probably had to stand and watch it. But you didn't really know what was going on. As a spectator, I didn't anyway.
I think, Neil, in those days when you had standing rooms on the terraces, we often experienced this situation where one pen was fuller than the rest of them. And the police or stewards used to reduce the load of that and move them out to the pens that are closer to the corner flag. So that's really what was going on in my mind. I didn't realise that there was a major tragedy, coming around the corner type
Well,
thing.
at first, excuse me interrupting you, but at first it did look like Liverpool fans fighting amongst themselves, didn't it?
Well, I think that's what
Probably
the
you couldn't
Nottingham
see that 'cause
Forest.
you were concentrating on the game, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what the Nottingham Forest supporters felt.
Well, that did happen, didn't it? Because eventually, after a while, you probably remember the police had to form a cordon across the halfway line.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
the police.
Neil, sorry to interrupt. We must give others an opportunity.
Yeah, if Ray ever wants to do any sort of things on that, I'm quite happy to join with him on that one, by the way.
Thanks very much indeed, Neil. Davey, I can now see you. So I think you have your hand up. What's your question, Davey? Fire away.
Yeah, I've managed to press the unmute button this time. Just for Ray, since the 2016 inquiry, and Professor Phil Scraton wrote his book shortly, well, revamped his book again shortly after that. I mean, the outcome finally was that they were unlawfully killed and that there was no responsibility laid whatsoever upon the Liverpool fans. Knowing what you know now and knowing about all the cover-ups, etc., including doctoring your statements since then, would you agree with that, the findings of that outcome of that hearing, that the fans were unlawfully killed? Was that, I don't know if that's too personal for you.
Well, I've never been involved in any of the hearings. The first one, nor the one in 2016. I've given statements to the police on both occasions. It's up to a jury, it's up to a judge, it's up to whoever chairs those commissions to come up with the decision that they did do. I was there to referee a match.
Yeah. Thank you for that, David, and thank you for that as well from Ray. Ray, can I just ask one other question that was in the inbox, just to before we say thank you? And the question was actually about whether or not you actually went back to Hillsborough and refereed again. And I just remember, did you actually ever get a chance to go back to the ground?
Yes, I did. Probably maybe the season after or the one after that. Yeah, I went back there and did a League Cup match with Derby County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ray, and thank you for the questions there. Clearly, that's everybody has their own recollections and memories of that day. And Ray, thank you very much indeed for sharing yours. So our last contributor this evening is a man who really does understand the power of resilience. And we talked earlier on, and Hayley quite rightly said that resilience is not bounce back ability. But if it was, I think this man's story over 2 years would really be the archetype of bounce back ability. But I'll let him tell you why. So I'm going to introduce you, probably for the first time I've ever actually had the good fortune to say this, to one of those very rare breed, a World Cup final match official. I bet that sounds as good today as it did in 2010. Mike Mullarkey.
Good evening. Thank you, Phil. I feel really honoured to be part of this fantastic event this evening, and certainly humble to be hearing the stories of sort of Alan, Con, Josh, and Ray. And I do feel a bit of a fraud because my story about mental resilience is basically getting an offside decision wrong, which, when you hear the context of the circumstances that the other friends and colleagues have talked about, kind of shies into insignificance, really. But albeit I managed to do it on a pretty big stage. But I'd like to start really at the beginning of my refereeing career. So I took the referee's course at 14, never good enough as a player, did a few years of youth football, did 1 year of adult football, absolutely hated it. And at the end of the season said to my dad, right, that's it, I've given it a go and it's not for me. And he kind of talked me around to say, well, why don't you start next season and see if it feels a little bit better. You know, you won't be the newest person on the list anymore. There'll be other new people and you'll kind of find your feet a little bit. So I guess if any of you are at that stage, then there is a bit of resilience in sort of hanging in there when you first start out and finding it difficult. And of course, with hindsight, it's the best thing that my dad ever taught me into. I got onto the Football League in 1998 as an assistant referee. I then spent 6 years, what I would say, bobbing along. I never threatened the bottom of the list. I never threatened the top of the list. And there were good reasons why, because I lived in the southwest of England. it's not a hotbed for football. There weren't great matches to be involved in. Nobody from the Southwest really ever got on. The observers were particularly difficult in the Southwest. They were quite picky. They never sort of see the best in people, and that fueled my belief for a period of time. I then went to a work conference. There was a guest speaker, a motivational speaker, and one of his quotes were, "The only limits are those that you accept yourself." And that made me think, actually, was it the observers, was it the lack of good football, or was it actually down to me? And I kind of revisited everything that I did as a match official, my training, my diet, my preparation, my law knowledge. And it might be sheer coincidence, but 12 months later, I got promoted onto the Premier League. So it took a long time. It took a lot of sort of, as I say, bobbing along before I kind of understood, similar to Con, that actually a lot of it is down to your own approach. Having got on the Premier League in August 2006, I got a phone call a month later saying that the FA were planning to nominate me for the international list. I'd only done 4 Premier League games, so it was quite an incredible call to receive. Took up the position of a FIFA assistant referee on the 1st of January. And on the 2nd of January, I was sent a letter from the FA to say I was now on a shortlist for match officials being considered for Euro 2008. I thought it was a hoax, and I'd gone from taking 6 years to get a promotion to now, in less than 6 months, being invited to do sort of matches across Europe. The upward trajectory was incredible. I got to a point where I felt invincible, that I just felt going on a crest of a wave. Game after game was going well. Got selected for Euro 2008, and in my first game at the Euros, that all came crashing down by making a mistake in not spotting an offside and allowing a goal to be scored. And as high as all that felt, the low that sort of hit me was massive. Of course, at a tournament, you're in a camp with the other referees. The support within the group is really good, but the one place you want to be is at home with your family, which of course I wasn't. So that made things difficult, but the contact from people, some of whom are really good friends and remain good friends those days, some from people that I never expected to hear from, really makes a difference. And Phil talked earlier about, ringing somebody up to say well done's a nice thing to do. Ringing up to say how are you when it's difficult is much harder, but I think is much more appreciated. And those calls meant a lot to me. We got one other game at the tournament, a dead rubber game. I had a really tight offside in that game, managed to get it right, but we knew that my mistake had cost us our retention of that tournament. I was always quite a nervous match official. I'd always feel really nervous going into games. But what I learned was that feeling nervous actually meant I was ready to perform. And so I associate nerves as a positive thing and anxiety as a positive thing in my officiating. It's interesting because I'm currently reading Michael McIntyre's book, the comedian's autobiography, and he has got a chapter in there where he talks about his first appearance at Live on the Apollo when he was an aspiring, progressing comedian, and 15 minutes before he's due on, he can't bring himself to go near the stage. He actually goes out the fire exit, goes out of the building, rings his friend in a moment and just saying, like, I can't do this. And his friend just talks him round to say, well, you've got the jokes, you've got the routine, you've done this many times before. It's nothing you can't do. And he went back and never looked back. So those conversations are really, really important. I think the best support I've ever had is obviously from my family, and my wife has a brilliant ability to context things for me. So if I'd get nervous before any game or tournament selections or whatever else, she would ask me simple questions like, well, are they playing on a bigger pitch this time? No. Well, are they having more players? No. Have they changed the laws for this game? No. She said, well, it's still 22 men on a ball then, isn't it? And whether I was doing a local game or the biggest game of my life, that's the thing that stuck with me. In the modern day, it would obviously be 22 people in a ball. The world has moved on. It's not just men. But 22 men in a ball was my mantra. After the Euros, the best support I got from the FA and from Howard and Darren particularly was immense, because it would have been easy for Howard to have seen me as the weak link and bombed me. He didn't, and he was quite determined that his first international game post-tournament, that I was had to be with him. How he convince the FA that? I don't know. But I'm forever grateful that he did, because it put us on a journey to the selection for the World Cup. The World Cup selection had 1 referee, 3 assistant referees. So I'm now in support, but in competition with 2 of my best friends, Darren Cann and Peter Kirkup. And at the end of that selection process, only 2 of you can be selected. And I had a pact with Peter and Darren that if any of us got information or news, we'd share it with the others. And the news of the selection for the World Cup came via an email and just simply said, these are the people that are nominated. And I stuck to my word and picked up the phone to Peter, and it's probably one of my hardest phone calls, but the fact that we're good friends now, 10, 11 years later, says that was the right thing to do. And we talked around how we both felt and everything else. And, I'm forever grateful that mistake, I still carry it with me, and it never goes away. And it did affect my confidence for a long time. And I always felt that people were thinking of it when they spoke to me. So if I met somebody at a conference or at a game or whatever else, I always thought that as they were looking at me, in their heads, they were going, you're the guy that made that mistake, aren't you? I'm sure most of them weren't. Some of them might have been, I don't know. But you always felt that sort of sign attached to you as you go around. And the only way you can get over that is exactly the way that Josh talked about going back out, about what Ray talked about going back out. Let's face it, I made a mistake in an offside in a game. I've not experienced what Josh did. I've not experienced what Ray went through. So for them to say, they went back to it and that was the right thing, how could I ever not, and I'm so glad I did. And I've ended up in a position where I've had some wonderful experiences with football. I've had lots of highs, I've had a few lows. And the thing is, those don't change. The great highs are fantastic, but the lows don't get any easier to manage. And somebody once said to me, it's not about the mistakes you make, it's about how you deal with them. And that's really important, because if we make a mistake and go, well, I won't make another mistake because I won't go out and do it again, then that's fine. You'll never make another mistake, but you'll never achieve anything either. And so to end up, as I did, 2 years after the experience of the Euros, walking out for the World Cup final, ultimately 2 minutes before the end of the game, having the onside offside decision to decide the destiny of the World Cup trophy was fantastic. And yet, 11 years on, nearly 12 now, I still think more about the Euro experience than I do the World Cup experience. And I think that's probably something about us as people, that we kind of tend to dwell on the disappointments and the difficulties. But since retiring as an active official, it feels as though the 2 ends of my emotions have been cut off. So I don't get the massive highs of that walking out at 3 o'clock on a match day, but I don't get the real lows of my name being on match of the day for getting something wrong. And but it's been a fantastic journey, only achieved by having the support, having the conversations, and I say the close friends that have helped me along the way and talked through. And the one thing I found is that when I do sit down and talk to people, whichever side of it, whether I'm sharing my experience or hearing theirs, is however uncomfortable it feels at the start, I've never felt worse at the end of a conversation. Usually feel better, but certainly never feel worse from it. So I think that's there to remember. And I'm big on my songs and my song lyrics, and I often sort of study my career at moments that I'm some fantastic stadiums, some fantastic places to think. And there's a song by Talking Heads, which is called Once in a Lifetime. And there's a line in there that says, well, how did I get here? And I often think, how the hell did I get here from those beginnings as the pretty average assistant referee in the southwest of England? And I guess that shows that if you kind of stick at it and work hard, it is incredible what you can achieve. So I'm very humbled to have had the opportunity to talk tonight. I'm very grateful for that, and to have had the chance to hear everybody else's stories as well. And thank you for giving me the time to share my story, really.
And Mike, thank you for sharing. And again, there's so many messages, so many themes that are coming across tonight that are so consistent around that, the importance of reaching out, the importance of, not feeling ashamed, actually saying, it's okay to talk. It's okay to not feel good about what's just happened. It's okay to feel disappointed about what I've done and to think, right, where do I go from here? And, just like Kenny Dalglish calling Ray, just like the colleague from Switzerland that Josh will never, ever meet, just reaching out and just saying, how are you feeling? So powerful. And the conversation that you had, with Pete must have been incredibly challenging, but what a great legacy and testimony to the friendship we've had since and the friendship you'll have going forward. So it's not just about talking and listening. It's actually sometimes knowing when to talk and when to reach out. Are there any very quick questions for Mike before we pass over? Anything in the inbox, Richard, that looks particularly?
Yeah, just one. Not a tricky question to answer, I think, Mike. What advice would you give to young referees who want to get to a World Cup final?
Find yourself a really good referee to work with. That's the start point. Listen, I was incredibly fortunate that things aligned for me. There have been assistant referees with more talent, more dedication than I had, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. It's about taking those opportunities as well. You can only control the things you do, and I know that's a very cliche thing to say, but if you work as hard as you can't control. The one thing I was fortunate of was that England never performed particularly well at World Cups when I was there. The two tournaments that England have played at since I retired, they've been to a semi-final and a final. Those things happening for the English officials, that meant they can't have those opportunities. So that is the ultimate game, but you can't kind of have a whole career that's just destined for one moment, because actually, if you whoever asked the question, if you were offered a career as a full-time assistant referee and end up doing the League Cup final, the Championship playoff final, the FA Cup final, that's a hell of a career. To officiate a Championship level, at League One, League Two level in the professional game. So I think it's about having realistic stepping stones, because if everything just depends on that one game, then almost every match official is going to end up kind of disappointed in that sense. So just work as hard as you can and really enjoy every step of the way, because the one thing I reflect on is that there are so many games that I did that have just passed me by because I was just so focused on, we've got to get through it, we've got to deliver this one, and it's really difficult to enjoy the kind of spectacle in the moment of that along the way. But you've got to enjoy what you do.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks so much indeed for that, Mike. And in closing this section, just to say thank you to all our contributors, to Alan for his story, to Josh, obviously for sharing what happened to him, to Con. Thank you for your honesty and humility, Con. To Ray, thank you once again for talking about something of such tragic consequences. And Mike, thank you for sharing that whole career in 15 minutes, but particularly that 2-year journey. So thank you to all those colleagues. I hope that's been useful. As I said earlier on, it was very much around, and we're going to go back to Hayley now, but it was really about trying to focus on that theory, those principles of resilience, and put those into a refereeing world that we'll all understand. So hopefully the experiences have been useful. And I will now hand you over back to Hayley to recap. Hayley, back to you.
Fantastic. Well, firstly, yeah, huge thank you. So many powerful stories there, some challenging, some very personal, some very, very tragic, but really bringing out of them some really rich insights into how people built their resilience. So yeah, my job is to very quickly recap resilience, and resilience is all about that capacity to stay well during those difficult times. Each of the journeys that we heard about tonight was so different, and we know our resilience now, and we know it can change. It can grow over time. We can learn. Hopefully, listening tonight, you might have identified some strategies that you can use, but also feel that we can do something about it. We can feel empowered. So in terms of the three key elements that build our resilience, I took so many rich insights in terms of ways people coped. And I just want to recap on a few of them. I think reframing came up a lot, sort of reframing what was happening, reframing our emotions, reframing ourselves and our attitude. I think it's definitely learning from our mistakes and seeing them as an opportunity to grow. We don't learn how to fail, do we? And actually, as we build our resilience, it's taking time to reflect on these things and to learn. It's also learning that sometimes we do need to go into autopilot. So our fight, flight or freeze mode kicks in, and sometimes we heard about people wanting to crawl under their shell, or we heard about Ray's buffer, needing that buffer for 10 days, not speaking to the media. Understandably, what happened was horrific. So sometimes knowing that we might need to go into autopilot, do the basics, get those right, and give ourselves a bit of breathing space before we go back out into the world. Some lovely mantras in the chat, but definitely hearing, it's about controlling the controllables. We can't fix everything, but also refereeing is obviously a huge part of your life. So some of you, it's also your career, and it's connected to other things. So we don't achieve one thing and we get happiness in the rest of our life. I think Mike said this really nicely, it's a journey. So I think thinking about those ways to cope and finding your own ways, I think, are absolutely key. We talked about the grief cycle as well, and those emotions, and kind of accepting them for what they are in that time. In terms of well-being, we've heard some tips tonight around our well-being, and just thinking about the 5 ways to well-being, a bit like we think about our fruit and veg, and 5 ways for our mental health being about learning, reflect, taking notice, giving, being active and connecting. So doing things that we enjoy and giving ourselves that permission to do those things is really key. And then finally, those social connections. We've heard so much about the power of talking and listening tonight. So whether it is those people in our inner circle, our family and our close friends, but also sometimes letting people in that slightly wider circle in. So to hear about the refereeing community and the support you've had from the football community. And I think it was Josh that said that most people are good people, and definitely just reiterating that reaching in to people when they might be struggling and things haven't gone so well. So it can be really hard to reach out when you're not feeling great or you've had a difficult time. We heard people saying they wanted to retreat. So, dropping that friendly text or that social media can be absolutely key. So hopefully you've picked up some ideas and tips to help build your resilience. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's something that we can all work on. It's a bit of a lifelong journey, and I think we probably eventually get it right one day. But just before I pass over, I just wanted to say, we talked a lot about speaking about mental health tonight. There are also lots of signposts available for people there that are willing, ready, able to listen. And this might be for you, it might be friends or family. Please pass it on. But we have a network of 110 local minds across England and Wales. We've got lots of resources on our website. There's people there ready to listen to you right now. So our friends at the Samaritans, you can text shout if you'd rather text, and you can have a conversation. They're there 24 hours. We've heard about the support in football, but also wider sources of support. So talking to someone you trust, we've heard so much about that tonight. If you're in work, you may have an employee assistance programme. Many of those offer counselling support, and of course our wonderful NHS. So reaching out is absolutely a sign of strength, and it's not always easy when you're struggling. And I think there's a quote I really like that says, you don't need a degree in listening to lend an ear. You don't have to be qualified. You don't need a degree. You just need to offer an ear. So it can be as simple as texting your friend. And half of actually every conversation is actually about listening. So I'm going to, with pleasure, pass over to Callum Parks. So Callum is one of our amazing mental health champions for referees, and he's going to talk about the support that's available. Over to Callum.
Yeah, good evening all, and excuse me, I echo the thanks I'm sure all of us have for the speakers who have come on tonight, and I hope not to keep everyone for longer than I need to. But as mentioned there, the Mental Health Champion Programme, of which I'm very proud to be a part of, is hopefully a really key cornerstone in helping referees at any level up and down the country with problems that they may face. So the Mental Health Champion Programme, hopefully I am preaching to the converted on this call, but just in case I'm not, the Mental Health Champion Programme has been rolled out in stages across every county in the country over the past 2 years. Some counties have 2, others have 1. I'm Norfolk's sole representative. But the Mental Health Champion, while categorised by County FA is independent to each county organisation and RA branch. So we are completely independent, and we provide a confidential outlet for each and every referee in our respective counties, and indeed elsewhere. Mental health doesn't discriminate, and certainly we don't either. We cover all levels, so some of us are level 7s, some much higher, and we come from all walks of life, as the refereeing family does. So we like to think we provide a fairly representative picture of the refereeing family in this country. The scheme has kind of 4 main aims, but it's very important for us to say from the outset that we're not counsellors or psychologists. We're not trained professionals who are there to treat mental health problems as such. But what we are there to do is any or all of the 4 following things. So the first thing is to spot, and that's to help you spot the signs of mental health problems such as stress, anxiety and depression in yourself or others, and they can manifest themselves on and off the pitch, of course. The second thing is to signpost, pointing you in the right direction into the hands of people such as Hayley and those at Mind who are much more learned than myself, and to services that can provide much more dedicated support. And that leads on to the third point, which is support, and that's helping referees address issues that may be manifesting themselves on the pitch or off it, and also supporting referees in helping themselves without our help. It's also about recognising how difficult it can be to have those conversations with others. Hayley's mentioned a really useful and important quote there, that you don't need a degree in listening to lend an ear. But I'm sure all the other mental health champions appreciate that sometimes having a friend make a disclosure to you about their mental health can be a very, very daunting proposition. It can often lead to feelings of guilt or confusion or anger. And so we're also there to help you help others, if hopefully that makes sense, so you can support your friends and colleagues and loved ones as best you can. As Josh and Ray have quite rightly said, and I totally agree, it is about finding what is best for you, and that is down to each individual referee. Some referees may love to get back out on the pitch. I know myself I would be included in that, but others may need some time away, and the support that a mental health champion can offer is to an extent tailored to the individual match official, depending on their issues, their personalities and their circumstances. But the fourth and arguably most important pillar of our role is stigma, and we're there to help people understand that, as Hayley has previously said, we all have mental health, and we're there to help facilitate the conversations between referees and their families, friends, colleagues and other referees that can help tackle any remaining stigma about mental health and mental health problems in our respective counties. Like I say, I am acutely aware that I might be preaching to the converted tonight, and if anything, that's probably a good thing. But I personally, as Norfolk's mental health or referee mental health champion, have had several of my colleagues make contact with me, and I think it's important to stress that sometimes it has been colleagues that I certainly wouldn't have expected to make contact with me, but they still are very much in need of help and support. That can be as simple as a very short phone call. It can be a much longer phone call. It can be about going through problems and signposting to relevant support services, or even just talking about life in general and how your boss at work is getting you down and things like that. All of those things are kind of encompassed by our role as we try to support referees in our county, and it's also helped me to understand and help deal with some of the issues that I have had as well. Each mental health champion across each county is contactable in slightly different ways. Hopefully each of your county FAs have contacted you about that, but if not, hopefully I'm sure you'll be able to contact your RDO or RAO, and they'll be able to point out how to contact your mental health champion. Just to summarise, really, it was a fantastic line that one of my colleagues used, and forgive me, I can't remember who said it, but it is a fantastic line that is, when 90 minutes are up, there is still time to talk. And I think that very much sums up what we do and how we support the refereeing family across the UK. Thanks, Hayley. That's me done.
Callum, thank you so much for joining us this evening and just sharing a little bit about the role and what you do. Tim Sadler has just popped a note in saying what a great job you do in Norfolk, and I very much echo that. Callum does a terrific job, as do the other mental health champions up and down the country. What I will do in the days that follow this meeting is of course follow up with an email, but that will include some signposting to the contact details of all the mental health champions. And should you wish to have a natter with any of them, then please do get in touch, and they'd be very happy to have a chat with you. So it remains just for me to sum the evening up, really. And first of all, thank you all once again for joining us. All of the slides and so on will be available widely via your county FAs. Thank you to all our guests. We're so delighted you're able to join us and share your stories. A particular thanks to Phil Knight. Phil has done a magnificent job really in putting this together and in leading this. And Phil, I thank you very much indeed. So go safe, everybody. Stay safe, go well, and enjoy the rest of your seasons. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Richard.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you much.
Some lovely messages in the chat.
Smashing. I think people have taken a lot from that. Terrific.
And just just grabbing a couple of those for your report.
Just waiting for one or two people to.
You don't have the same functionality as Teams, do you? That magic functionality.
Yeah. Phil, are you still with us?
We lost Phil.
We've lost Phil.
We lost Phil.
Must admit, I stayed on, Rich. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to stay or go, but I think everyone else
likewise.
is gone,
Just making sure.
You guys are fantastic. There's so many bits I could have grabbed from everything you all said. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Absolutely terrific. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Delighted to be a part of it. I think it's been a fantastic event. Really fantastic.
Yeah, some great stuff, and the messages that have been fired into the chat show how appreciative people are and how much they've got from it. So top stuff. Thank you both very much. It looks like everybody's disappeared, so everybody's free to go. You're free to go.
Yeah, I was only staying because I thought you were going to buy us a drink, but we'll just go.
All right, whenever I see you're first on my
I'll hold
drinks
you to that.
list.
Josh, write that down so we've got that to refer to. So.
I heard it. I'm your witness, guys. I'm your witness. I don't drink.
It's all recorded anyway.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, no, I meant to stop the recording just before I said that.
Well done, Josh. Great.
Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Great to see you.
Thanks, guys. All the best, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hayley, thank you, of course, once again. Brilliant as ever.
No problem. There's some great. I was just pinching some of these quotes before you I don't know if you get to save the quotes on Teams.
I don't honestly, actually, genuinely, I'm not entirely sure.
I will pop them on an email to you tomorrow, but I'm saving some of the good ones because I think they will be nice to use. Like there was one, it's always great to know there's someone else there or something. It's like, oh, but yeah, Phil did a great job with that, didn't he? So
brilliant. I'm just going to ring him now. I'd hoped he would stay on, but I'll give him a buzz now.
No worries. Well, good to be part of it, and great job. They're brilliant.
Thanks so much,
I like the referees. See you later.
Hey, all right, Ray. See you later.